Hey everyone. So I did a poll back in November on Instagram after doing track day, asking if people would be interested in me doing a YouTube video about it, just with some tech stuff. Um, Lots of people actually voted yes. I think pretty much everyone who viewed it, and surprisingly a lot of people who went into bikes as well, voted yes. When I actually shared the poll, it's not spooky at all. When I shared the poll, a lot of people actually sort of commented and messaged me back saying they'd be really interested to see as well. So what I thought I'd do is split it up, talk about Simone's experience on the ZX10, how that went, and my experience on the Buell as well. I'd seen a lot of, and I initially asked it on Instagram a little bit sarcastically too, because I'd seen a lot of people, create content after doing track days and didn't think much of it. So I kind of thought, well, why shouldn't I do something? So yeah. So I split it into two, starting with the ZX10. The main thing that we were sort of looking at was the initial prep beforehand, because it had been quite a while. We were trying to think when this bike was last out on track, and it might have been early 2019. So that's a good year and a half, at least. So I kind of pulled the bike apart, just went over everything, checked everything. A few little things might be helpful to know. Obviously, cleaning brake parts, carbon off pistons and things like that, and calipers. Obviously, putting in fresh brake fluid and all that sort of stuff too. I like to go around and check the wiring as well, because on race bikes, what I like to do is run the wiring a little bit more inboard. So if the bike has a low side, then you really don't run the risk of it sort of being damaging the loom very much. Obviously, that means it sits up against things, so the vibration, you've got to keep an eye on that. So yeah, the other thing that I noticed with this was picked up that one of the clip-on brackets around the fork was actually cracked, and it was on the inside as well. So if I hadn't have done that thing where I'd stripped it down, done a good thorough check and sort of safety inspection, for lack of a better term, I really would have missed that. So that gave the opportunity as well. While it was all apart, I changed a few little things in the ergonomics in the bike as well, with Simone too, something we've been planning to do for a little bit of time. Yeah, so that was it. Pretty straightforward. Good to go over a bike. I like to re-torque everything as well. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So the reason why we kind of did the track day, I mean, obviously anyone who follows us on Instagram knows we've had quite a bit of stuff going on, building the house and everything like that. We had lockdowns here in Victoria with COVID and things like that too. And to be honest, we hadn't missed going to the racetrack. I hadn't missed it at all. But we kind of had the plan at some stage to actually go do a track day and see how we were kind of feeling about it, both of us. And yeah, so it came about, and I think initially we were sort of planning December, January, But anyway, a few friends of ours had booked in that track day mid-November, and we hadn't seen them in a fair few months. Some of those guys we haven't seen in the better part of a year, so it's kind of a good opportunity to go do something social. But really the intention was to kind of just get out there, ride around, see how we kind of felt about it all. So with that in mind, we weren't intending to do any timing or anything like that, like lap times or any of that sort of shit. But also as well, like, talking about track prep for this bike, it would have been a very different approach in comparison to if we were looking to do like a season, for lack of a better term, of consistent ride days and consistent track days. In which case I would have done things like services, suspension parts, probably with the amount of use this bike's had since it was last done, do things like probably the swing arm bushings, wheel bearings, check the headstand bearings, maybe do them. Again, obviously do things like fork oil and service the shock, do the valves as well, those little things, but kind of didn't really need to do that at this stage, because again, it was really just to sort of see what we were going to plan to do going forward, really. So yeah, then we turned up. Again, split it into the two bikes. sort of had Simone go out and do a few sessions and stuff, and then when she'd sort of come in, we were kind of talking a little bit because there's quite a bit of a break between sessions, and she sort of said, yeah, she was feeling really good. She felt like she was going by her own admissions. She sort of said, yeah, I'm just taking it easy. I think I'm going pretty slow and all that sort of stuff. And obviously, was talking about the new track surface. So if you don't know, obviously Crawford's been resurfaced. There's quite a few bumps where there weren't bumps before, partially resurfaced, I should say. Not all the track has been resurfaced. So she was talking about these bumps that were there, the way they've done the foundation, that weren't there beforehand. And also some of the corners are quite green with the tarmac, so there's not a lot of rubber down. So she was kind of taking it a bit easier through those areas, she felt, than what she would have been previously. But equally, she said some of the corner exits were wider, so she said some of those corner exits were a lot better. So we just decided to do some timing. So I pretty much went over the fence and did some timing. She came in from the session where I timed, and her pace was actually really quick. And I actually sort of said to her, well, you're kind of doing race pace, on a track day, which she was kind of surprised about. So after that, we kind of talked about how we could adjust the bike, because she was sort of saying at one corner in particular where she would normally be her braking zone, and from that braking zone then into her tip in point, she said there was a lot of bumps that were really upsetting the front end, putting quite a lot of aggressive feedback through the front end. So I was kind of thinking about that, and based on what she was telling me and how she was telling me how the bike behaved and how I wanted to combat that, I actually ended up leaving the front end as it was and not focusing at all on the front end, but changing the rear end. So the term I would use for this would probably be tuning. So in my mind, and I'm not a suspension engineer or a suspension technician or anything like that, but in my mind, when I think about setup, I kind of think about things that are probably a little bit more hardware based, for lack of a better term, like springs, maybe geometry, things like linkages and things like that. So you're really changing the hardware. I'd call this probably tuning, where I'm actually adjusting what's already on there. So I kind of made some pretty significant adjustments on the back of the bike. And then what I should also say is it's a little bit of like an educated guess. So based on what she was telling me, it was really a case of like, okay, well, let me make some changes to see if I can kind of get the bike to sort of behave the way she would like, or reduce some of that issue. Well, not issue, but some of the some of the issues that were coming through the front end with like that kind of the bumps and all that sort of stuff, and particularly in the turning, just to make the bike more neutral, so it would kind of skim over the bumps rather than be upset by it. So yes, there's a little bit of an educated guess, which is all we can do. Like, I don't think there's really a way, particularly rider to rider, where it's really about getting them confident, I think, or in this case, getting Simone confident. So what might have worked for her probably wouldn't work for someone else. So it was really a little bit of a guess of changing that. So with that, I sort of said, okay, I'll go over to the fence near where the pit road entry is. I'll take the tools to change everything back the way it was, or make other adjustments. But yeah, just go out, see how it goes, see how it feels. And I said to her, if it feels like it's not great, or you're not comfortable with it, or you feel like it's going in the wrong direction, just come back in and I'll change it. So she went out, and it was fascinating because when I was actually watching her on track, the bike looked so smooth. Her riding style actually looked like it changed a little bit, and it looked like it was smoother than usual, to the point where it looked deceptive in a way that it almost looked slow. It almost looked like there was one point where she came around a corner, and I almost thought, with the body language and language of the bike going through the corner, I was wondering if she was taking it easy through the corner to then come into the pit lane, which looked in contrast to how she'd normally take that corner. And then as she went past and actually timed the lap, it was actually the best time she'd ever done at the track, like out of all her racing and all that sort of stuff. And it's important not to look at the one lap in isolation, because what you want to do is, I think, in my opinion, always look at a group of laps and see what the consistency is like. So with her, throughout that session, the laps were consistently around her personal best pace. So it wasn't like she just did one quick lap and then dropped the time off again. It was consistently really, really quick. And at a track day as well, you kind of take into account for the space you generally leave other riders and things like that. So she was coming up and passing people. She'd give them a bit of space, maybe not attack the corner as much as possible. So you sort of see a tenth or two kind of fall off because of that, because obviously it affects that, particularly a place like Broadford, it affects that speed you kind of carry as you link everything together. So she kind of came in and she actually didn't feel like she did as quick as she did, so she was quite surprised to sort of see the lap times and see she was actually doing personal bests. What was interesting about that was as well the feedback that she gave, which was that she felt like from mid-corner to corner exit, she sort of said it felt like the front of the bike was kind of running wide in a way. Not actually physically running wide, but almost like it would take extra effort or extra force through the bars to then change to tighten her line than what it would normally take. But she didn't say at all when I asked her. I said, well, did it feel like if you push too hard, you potentially lose the front or there'd be lack of grip or anything? She said, no, the grip was still there. The actual confidence was still in the front end. It just sort of felt from that mid-corner to corner exit that it was difficult to steer if she then wanted to tighten the radius of the corner from that point. The other interesting thing was that the back tyre was quite shredded, which is pretty standard with a new track surface. So we kind of felt like after that was because all of a sudden the pace had gone quite fast compared to the other sessions, that tear of the tyre could have been due to that, but it could have also been due to the settings on the shock. So what we did was found out, one of our mates was telling us about that they were sort of running quite different tyre pressures to what we were running to try and combat that tyre tear. So we changed the tyre pressures to what they recommended. And just to rule it out, I actually took the changes back off the rear end that I made. So put the setup, changed the settings on the shock back to the way that they were for the previous session. So I went out, and it was interesting. Simone went out, she came back in and said, yeah, the bike suddenly steers like really, really quick. She can put it wherever she wants. It's really easy to steer, really easy to throw around, really agile, but her pace had actually slowed. So that's really interesting as well, because when talking to her and she feels real fresh, real confident, like she can feel like she can really push it, and then the lap times are that tiny a little bit slower. It kind of shows that, you know, it's definitely not the rider in that case. So we then ended up playing with it, changing the settings I did back to the session with where she did her personal best. Left the tyre pressures where they were because the tyre had cleaned up a little bit with the different tyre pressures. And then she went out again, and she was quicker in that point, but not quick as that initial session where we just changed the rear end settings. So that was quite interesting. So we kind of run around with that sort of setup, just obviously to try and save the tyre and things too. That's probably a good example of where, like, when you adjust a bike to kind of conserve tyre wear, it's not necessarily going to be the fastest as well. So I like to kind of think of anything you do, like whether it's tuning an engine or whether it's tuning suspension or whatever it may be, like you always kind of got to choose the compromise that you're going to make. Interesting as well, it's like one of the final sessions that I kind of said to her, all right, well, let's put the bike back to where it was when she did the PBs, and she just went out and did, I think, like 2 or 3 laps, and immediately grabbed those times again. So it was kind of showing that, you know, the confidence was there in that too. So yeah, I think, you know, some simple little changes, and again, like, we didn't touch the front tyre where it was really, really good as well. It wasn't really shredding the tyre, like I didn't sort of see any tear on the tyre or anything like that, even when it felt like it was sort of being pushed quite wide and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, really, really interesting. If you're a nerd about this stuff like me, you probably find it curious that just changing a few little things backwards and forwards could affect kind of the pace throughout the day as well. So that's quite interesting. Yeah, I took my buell out. It was a bit of an interesting one with my buell because the current setup's really for road use. Over the years, I've kind of adjusted this bike to really suit country roads in Victoria. So this is probably the difference where I'd say the setup on this bike is quite different, because all the shock setup, the internals like springs, valving, all that sort of stuff's completely different. I also had the sport touring tyres on it too, and the reason why that ended up being that way was I put a deposit on my new road bike, which if you follow me on Instagram and stuff, you'll know that I've got, but there's still quite a delay for that. So I bought it off a guy who had it in his collection, and to get a roadworthy and to get me happy to take the bike, he had a few parts to replace on it. And obviously with COVID and lockdown stuff, it was proving to be a bit of a challenge to get those parts. So it was just a little bit extra delayed as well. So if I had had the bike by then, maybe I would have done some changes to this before the track day. But probably not, because again, going back to the main reason why we were doing this track day, it was again just to sort of see how we felt about it, going out to the track with bikes and all that sort of stuff. So I decided to leave those on there. The other thing is we were on holidays, so we had a few weeks off, and we kind of wanted to kind of have the flexibility that if we wanted to, we could get away on our road bikes, chuck the gear sacks or racks on there and head away for a few days. So I just wanted to be able to have the bike in the same situation where all I had to do was really put the indicators and mirrors back on it and the gear sack rack on it, and we could piss off to either high country or Great Ocean Road or whatever for a few days on the bikes. So that was quite interesting. I'd also been quite a few years since I'd done a track day actually. So I think 2017 was the last time I did a track day, maybe early 2017. And back then, whether I was on this bike or the Supermoto, and on the rare occasion, I think I rode this once or twice on track day back then, I was in probably the medium fast group. So, and I wasn't like the slowest person in that group, but I certainly wasn't quick in that group. But I could kind of confidently say in that group as well. And thinking back to it, I think probably from about mid or late 2015 through to that time period in 2017, we were riding all the time. We'd be out on dirt bikes every weekend, sometimes a couple of times every weekend. We were doing Supermoto at Took in South Morang, pretty frequently as well. And then doing fairly frequent track days as well. And then Simone was racing too. And then we were riding our road bikes. So again, it's a little bit one of those things, you keep the muscle memory up, you keep your reflexes in tune, and you just get used to doing it, just like any sport, I guess, for lack of a better term. So obviously I wasn't out in that medium fast group. I ended up being in, what would be the fast or the slow groups or something like that. And back then as well, when I had the bike, the Buell out doing those track days, I had super courses on it. So if you guys who know race bikes, effectively the same tyres that run on the 600 Super Sports, so they're like a road legal slick effectively. But they're designed to be used with tyre warmers. They have a really narrow heat range. I also had stiffer suspension in it and things like that as well. So it was a vastly different bike to ride back then too. I sort of found, obviously with the sport touring tyres on there, technical info tells you can't really use tyre warmers on them. So it's a little bit like going out on wets in a way. And while these are the best thing that I ever did for the bike on the road, what benefited them on the road with having that good feedback and that progression through tipping the tyre onto its side, I felt for me didn't really kind of work on the track with my, where my riding's at. I'd sort of liken it to, like if I'm driving a car and like the van, for example, like I'm kind of comfortable turning into a bend and having that little bit, that flex with like the van tyres or the light truck tyres, and you kind of get that flex and that little bit of that lean and that yaw and all that sort of stuff, and you kind of know when the grip's going to come back to you. I don't have that confidence at my level on a bike, so obviously someone with more experience would probably go out there and kind of go, yeah, it's not great, but it's still tip in and maybe get a little bit of sponginess and not quite the feedback they'd want. Would still probably be okay with it. But for me, if I'm going to do a track day on this bike again, I definitely look at, I am sort of planning to sort of set it up to do some track stuff on it. So I'll probably look at, again, going back to probably just some super courses because they're kind of easy to get. Everyone runs them. That's what we run on this and the Triumph, so we know what pressures work and different things like that. I've also got a lot of suspension parts for buells floating in here. So what I'll do is I'll probably just put together a quick kind of set shock and fork setup. It's just a little bit more track focused, I guess. Yeah, and just make it kind of just a good, easy track bike. So I guess the question I'll probably have, so I'll preempt that and probably answer it about what the plan is after doing that track day, and what we're sort of looking at for the future. We haven't really decided anything. I'm not going to kind of speak to what Simone's plans is, and she generally doesn't keep them quiet anyway. But I mean, for me, what I'm sort of thinking is, obviously, I did end up getting the new road bike, so this one currently is what I'm thinking of doing is actually setting this up, just again, as I said, track focus, doing a little bit more like touristy kind of track stuff, trying to get to some tracks I generally wouldn't otherwise go to, and just enjoy this bike, which I do love this bike, I do enjoy it, enjoy this bike, enjoyed it at a few different locations. And the other part too is because I've got a road bike and I'm going to be doing a lot more road riding, is take the opportunity at track days to actually practice my riding more. So just go out, everyone's going in the same direction. Hopefully the track surface is going to be fine, but it's a pretty controlled environment. There's no cars pulling out on you and all that sort of stuff. So pretty much just go out, do laps, and practice my riding style. Work on my riding skill, which would just make me safer on the road and all that sort of stuff too. So yeah, that's kind of that. Pretty straightforward. Any questions or anything like that, hit me up. Let me know what you guys want to see, YouTube videos or anything like that. I've got a few ideas, whether you want to sort of see something about how I do the suspension for this, whether you want a few little techie kind of things and kind of talk through that. I had an idea about maybe if I do like a little bit of a suspension 101 thing. I think it's probably easy, like how springs work and all that sort of stuff. I don't know if anyone's interested in seeing something like that. Again, I'm not a suspension technician, but or an engineer, but I can probably give people a rough idea if you're into track riding or just into riding bikes, and you just want a bit of a 101 on how it all kind of works and my view on it. Let me know. If you want me to do a video about the road bikes, let me know. So yeah, thanks.